Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. I am back after a couple weeks of a little break from making videos, and today my guest is somebody who I met a few months ago, and we're finally making this video together. Her name is Veronica Hughes, and she's an author. She's written 3 books. I've listened to her on a podcast she was on, and I knew immediately we had a lot in common. And I could not wait to ask her to be my guest. And she said yes. And before we start the interview, I just want to thank everybody for sharing my videos, liking, sending me messages on Instagram, and leaving comments for me and my guest. It just means everything to me. And those of you who have been so kind to support my work with my PayPal link, I want to give an extra special thank you to you. And I have a lot of exciting things coming up for the channel. I'm going to do a special channel update to talk about some new projects I'm working on and some ideas I have for the channel. But without further ado, Veronica, thank you so much for being my guest today. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. It's a lovely day, and I'm very excited about this interview.
Yeah. So first, I want to tell everybody how many things we have in common. And this is not an exhaustive list at all, but of course, the main thing was that we were both involved in New Age type stuff for a very long time before we found Orthodoxy. And I was a massage therapist. You were doing healing and teaching classes in spiritual energetic type healing. We've traveled to a lot of the same places, including India and France and Hawaii. We both were born and raised in California. Your birthday is one day after mine. There's so many things. When I was reading your book, I could not put it down because it just seemed like with almost every page, there was something you were saying that I truly related to. And I'm not sure if I told you, but I have a Telegram group of women. There's over 100 women in the group, and a lot of us are catechumens or inquirers. And one thing we talk about a lot is we have a real desire to learn from women who have been Orthodox for many years. And so that's another reason why I'm so happy to connect with you, because like these other women in my group, I really have a longing to connect with Orthodox women for guidance, support, laughter, recipe sharing, all the things that young women look to older women for support with. So thank you for being my new friend. And I would love for you to share a little bit about your conversion. I want everybody to buy your books because they're so good. So of course, we're not going to be able to get into everything today, but I hope that my audience will check the description below to get the link for this book. This is the first one in Veronica's series of 3 books about her life. And this one really goes into her experience with Eastern mysticism, her healing modalities that she was practicing and teaching, and how the conversion to Eastern Orthodoxy started. And it actually starts with your childhood. And if you want to just start there, how you were raised, because you were raised with knowledge of our Lord. And so how did it go from that to getting into Eastern mysticism and having a guru and going to India and teaching all the new agey kinds of modalities?
Well, I was brought up in North Beach in San Francisco, and I had an aunt. So my parents were, my mother was American. My father came from Italy in 1921 with one of these aunts, Aunt Lena. And I was raised with Jesus Christ and raised Catholic. And my Aunt Lena also did tea leaf readings and card readings for people. She's from the old country in Italy. So she went to a fortune teller before she came over on the boat, and fortune teller told her what she, and in Italy, and I've been back there 3 times and visited my dad's village, and they're very religious, or they were very religious in that time. That was, the turn of the century. And they also were very superstitious, and they mixed superstition and religion. And so my aunt had a talent for reading tea leaves, and also she would read cards. And so I grew up with her doing that around me. Yeah. So I had both influences when I was, yeah, she took us to church very devoutly. But she also read tea leaves. So there we go. She used to do it. She worked in factories because she's not well educated. She worked at Levi Strauss, and she worked in cracker factories, and she would, at her lunch break, all the girls would come to her and they want readings from her.
So do you think that that's partly what got you into wanting to learn about like meditation and like Hindu spirituality?
I think it predisposed me for it, but what really prompted my movement away from Christ and into other things was that I moved away from Christ. In my teens, when I grew up in the 60s and 70s, the Catholic Church has just gone through a huge reformation with Vatican II. And truthfully, I didn't like the changes. I really liked the old church. I liked the mystical aspect of the church. I didn't like that it was in Latin. So the one thing I really did like was that we were talking in English finally. But I did like the service and the depth of it. And that all changed after Vatican II. So now that's retrospect. I can look back and go, yes, that's what happened. But then, I was in the 60s growing up, and there was a big rebellion, the sexual revolution, protests against Vietnam. And so all of that contributed to, by the time I reached my freshman year in college, I was still in a Newman Center and met my first real boyfriend, who later became my first husband. But after that first year, we were gone. That was it. That was the last. And I just didn't like where the Catholic Church was going. I didn't like the services. It was just not the same. And so, and then I also, because I had a boyfriend and had premarital sex, that's at the ripe age of 17 and a half. I mean, that was the sexual revolution, it was like, okay, well, I guess I'm a sinner, so therefore, and it's a real part of Catholic psychology too. Very hard to get out of that guilt, which doesn't exist in the it's not the same in the Orthodox Church. And so, yeah, so I left, and then I got in a very severe car accident when I was 17. And that's partially where I have my back problems now. And that was probably God's way of turning things around. And so when both my mother and I were in the car accident, and so then we wound up going to a chiropractor, but we also wound up going to a woman who did meditations, yoga, because our bodies were in pain. And so that was my real first exploration into alternative religions, Eastern religions. Yeah. And it made me feel better, and I had a real predisposition for that. And so then I got married, and then I got really sick in my early 20s, a combination of a lot of things. And it was my illness that brought me to the door of the first holistic doctor, really, that I ever went to. And in my day, there weren't a lot of them. He was the physician for Muktananda, who was a very well-known guru at that time. I was also involved in EST at the time, doing seminars, and it was Werner Erhard who was involved in Erhard seminar trainings, who brought over Muktananda. And so that's how I got introduced to the physician who helped me to get better, but he also prescribed listening to Guru Muktananda, or Baba as we called him, on mantra tapes. So I started listening, And so then I had, I was at home trying to get better. And then I had a visitation from, quote, the guru in my meditation, a very powerful one, where he reached down with before me appeared this very large blue light, and then behind it, the image of a man showed up. Oh, but before that, I'd gone to a psychic healer too. So, yeah. And she said I had a real talent for doing this. So, and she was very helpful to me in some ways, because of I had a precancerous condition, and I was just really, really sick. And so it took 2 years for me to get better. And all of these things helped me to get better. But when, Muktananda came and touched me on my third eye in that vision that I had, I went into a deep trance. And when I came back, I realized I was not kind of the same. I was not in the same reality or person that I was before. And it opened up this whole world, inner world, so to speak, that I just assumed was fine. And so I went to visit him. I, saw him in Santa Monica. That was a unique experience too, of going into a retreat with 1,000 people, and you were going to receive Shaktipad, right? Get the kundalini energy going. And I'm, sitting there, and he's way over in some other side of the room. And as he's going around the room, lo and behold, people start crowing like roosters, mooing like cows. I mean, the place sounded like a zoo. And I'm sitting there and going, okay, God, I sure don't want this to happen to me. It's like, can you not have this happen to me? It didn't, thank God, when they bopped me on the head. But I think the only reason it didn't is because I was baptized.
You're protected.
Child. I was protected.
So for people that are watching right now and they've never heard of this, can you just quickly explain, are they told that this is a wonderful healing experience, or are they told?
It'll open your chakras up, it'll open your spiritual centers up, and you'll get, and it'll connect you to your higher self, and and you'll get expanded, and you'll be, and it's all about you, by the way. The New Age is all about you. And it's all about you transforming and finding out things about you, right? And what so it, yeah, I, now that I'm where I am, I've actually had someone pretty famous in the Orthodox world refer someone to me who was in a similar situation with a different guru, and she got possessed. Yeah. I'm so I'm just saying that this was dangerous stuff, but we didn't know that back then. We're very gullible. If somebody appeals to our vanity, tells us, and then we're all hurting, we're all suffering. So why wouldn't we want to go out of our bodies, So it was, and as it turned out that I had sexual abuse in my history that I didn't realize until I was in my 40s, that really predisposed me to wanting to go out of my body. I don't want to be here, and so if you offered me a route to get out of my body, I was going to take it. Between being a massage therapist, is how I started, like with you, and you're, then getting messages for people when I put hands on them, to, starting to teach channeling classes. I was adept at it. And it was, what I did for 25 years. Yeah.
And I think in your book, you mentioned using psychedelics too. And that's unfortunately something I got involved with as well. And it kind of makes you think you have all this special knowledge, and that you're special, that you've been chosen to understand these things. And for me, it just built a lot of spiritual pride. I didn't know it at the time, but looking back now, it was a lot of vainglory and pride.
I get it. Mine wasn't quite like that, but everybody's experience is different. I was going through troubled waters in my marriage, and when I was doing it, I went in there to more work on what I actually had. I never really, with my channeling, I went exactly to that place where I was vainglorious, like the guides they'd seduce me in all different kinds of ways by flattering, oh, we're good guides, we can do this and take care of you and protect you, and and if you open up to us, it's like we're gonna, we're the good guys, but it was always feeding my ego, always feeding my ego. Whereas when I did, we called it medicine, healing medicine. I had some very challenging experience, some really remarkable experiences that got me reconnected with God in a positive way. I'd say that was much more of a positive thing for me,
Oh, good.
than one that was that fed my ego, because I was just going through too much trouble in my marriage to. I was like, I'm going there to try and get help, it's like I gotta save my marriage, but it didn't wind up being saved, and it went on, and I got divorced. So yeah, it was for psychological purposes, not for recreational. We were with the first people that did that for that were psychologists and psychiatrists. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It was
And
a great group.
I want to go back just real quickly to the channeling. I've never done that. I listened to people who were channeling, like Abraham Hicks, things like that. I used to listen to their content, but I never did it myself. But when you were doing that, were you still aware of what was going on, or did the entity overtake?
I never allowed it to overtake me. No, I mean, some people do that, or can they, but I never ever let that happen. No. Yeah.
Okay.
I never did let step completely out of the way. No, I was always present. Yeah.
And were people sitting in front of you and you would be telling them information, or did you write it down and then tell it to them later?
No, I would lead groups, and I've always been a teacher, so I liked teaching channeling. I had sessions where I would do past life regressions with people, and I would channel for them. But what I really liked was teaching. So I wound up with the community that I was involved in, the Michael group. They said they needed somebody to teach people how to channel, and I just decided, okay, I can do that. And I put together. So I've actually written 6 books. 2 of them were metaphysical. It was a handbook for my classes. So I spent several years putting together a handbook for how to interpret the Michael teaching, how to channel it, and that kind of stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't want to give away too much of your book, but I know the audience is wondering what happened when you became a Christian and you had to tell these students and community members that you're a Christian now. How did they take that?
They thought I was nuts. They really did. They thought but they saw it coming, because I wasn't a quick convert. I went through a lot of spiritual battles, and it was a 3-year process altogether for me to convert. And the initial part of it was very, very challenging. And but I initially, because my husband was the one who became Orthodox first, and he was the one that led the way into Eastern Orthodoxy for us. And he started going to this little church in San Francisco, because he was part of a New Age metaphysical group himself, and they had all converted to Eastern Orthodox Christianity. And so when he hit his rock bottom spiritually and realized that he couldn't live his life without Christ, he got reconnected with them. And then he told me that, and I said, oh, because I knew he was lost spiritually. I hadn't at that point realized that I was lost spiritually as well. So I was still, the master teacher, the da 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 da, and I was like, oh, but you found the path. That's wonderful, honey. And I went with him to the church the first time, and it was during the middle of Lent, coincidentally, and it was this little basement church. It was kind of dark, and they had everything was, in black, and okay, now I'm a fallen Catholic, right? And I go in there, and the worst word you can hear when you're a Catholic is, "You're a sinner."
Mm.
And they said that over and over and over again. And I'm like, okay, I don't think. And every single hot button in my body that was incomplete about Christianity got triggered. Fortunately, I'd done a lot of work with a Holocaust survivor who worked on me about reactions. And I knew when it was happening, I was just in a lot of reactions, but I had no control over how I reacted. And after a half hour in that church, I ran out of the church crying, and with the priest's wife running after me. And she's going, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I said, "Leave me alone, leave me alone. I don't want to talk to anybody." And I ran all the way up Suture Hill, or walked all the way up, and sat there and just wept and stayed there for like 45 minutes. And meanwhile, the priest's wife goes back to my husband and says, "Is she going to be okay?" And, and he goes, "Oh yeah, she'll be fine. In fact, this is great because she's just been working the last 8 years on changing the way she reacts to things. And so she'll get clear that this is a reaction. And then she's going to have to start to work on herself and figure out why she's in reaction to this." That's exactly what happened, but it was quite a process. Every time we drive into church, I'd be in reaction. I'd actually pound the dashboard of the car because I was under spiritual attack by demonic energies, and then I get into church, quiet down, I'd be fine. Leave church, it'll all start up again. My poor husband, I don't really know how he did that, how he managed it, yeah.
And did you share with the priest about your past or anything like that? Or you just,
the fortunate thing was, because this group had also metaphysical inclination.
oh, right. Mm-hmm.
It was, they were very supportive of my process in that they allowed me to go through what I was going through. And they were really very supportive because they knew the struggle that I was in. And, and after 25 years of being steeped in this stuff, of letting all these different entities, all quote demons, including my visitation from the guru, also demonic.
Yeah.
I always meant well. I always did good. My purpose was to help people to heal. And they did when we were focusing on repentance, coincidentally, in our sessions. There was always something good that came out of it because I was always wanting to help people. That was my natural inclination, to help and heal. But it was a really challenging experience for me because they had embedded themselves in my bodies in different ways. Yeah. And when I really gotten, well, so then I don't want to ruin the apex of the book, which is when I had my rock bottom and when I realized, oh my God, I'm under spiritual attack and delusion. That'll leave for the readers to read because it's a good story. But when that happened, I saw a devil run off, and I picked up my, I literally saw a devil run off, and I screamed, and I picked up an Orthodox prayer book, and I never put it down since. Yeah.
Wow, that is so amazing.
And they were after me until I got, well, they're always after us, but they were after me until I got baptized. And then things finally started to calm down somewhat. Yeah. But I had to get through the portal of the baptism. I had to get rebaptized too, because I just didn't feel, after everything I'd done, I felt it was really appropriate that I get rebaptized. Yeah.
So Veronica, I would love to talk a little bit more about this idea of being in reaction, or for me, sometimes it feels like a resistance that I have to push through or understand before I can really let it go, in relation to converting from New Age, for example, to Orthodoxy. Can you talk a little bit more about that reaction feeling that you had to Orthodoxy?
Yep. And by the way, it's been 25 years this year that I've been Orthodox now.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
25th anniversary.
Wow.
Yeah. So a lot of people, and when I was making the transition between teaching classes that were metaphysical and teaching classes that were about God, I did do that for about a year or two. I started to change things as I was starting to change. And a lot of what I worked on with people in those classes, was what I was working on, which was, why am I in reaction to Christ? And I didn't even use the word Christ, because in my classes, most people would freak out about the word Christ, just as I did. And that was, people have a lot of history with God, and it's because of their history with people, not God.
Mm-hmm.
It's the people that we know in our lives that represent God. So in my case, in my childhood, I had several bad experiences with a Monsignor in the Catholic Church who, it wasn't sexual related, but it was abusive, in that he, in confession, he yelled at me and would get very belligerent in confession. And then we used to have a children's mass that was at 8 a.m. My parents weren't very religious, but my sister and I would go all the time. And one time we missed the 8 a.m. service and we went to the 9 a.m. service. And he saw us sitting there and he singled us out, made us stand up, and he said, "You've committed a sin. You've come to the adult mass instead of the children's mass."
Oh my
Now, I mean, it's like, okay, so that's a kind of a traumatic event. I never went
Yes.
back to that church after that
Mhm.
happened. I never went back.
Mhm.
And and when I became Orthodox and I had to go on do your life confession that you have to do, I went up to give my confession and my knees were knocking. I mean, and I'm like going, what is the matter with me? But I mean, it was related to my past. It wasn't related to my present. It was, past memories of being made wrong in confession.
Mhm.
And so we all have people in our lives who represented religious life or God to us, and in one way or the other, they were in their fallen state. They were not in they were misrepresenting God. They were representing themselves and using God as the vehicle, right? So if you have reactions when you're in the process of converting, one source can be that it's your past and whatever you experienced. I mean, some people have never been Christian,
Mhm.
so that's a whole different story. But for those of us that have, whether evangelical background or Catholic background, there's always issues that there's a reason why we left those churches or why we're searching, because it's not fulfilling. It's not, something is missing.
Mhm.
But it also can be that people were abusive or took advantage of us, or so we have that history. And then we also have our own passions that play into part with it. And then we have the devil that
Yeah.
works on us,
Yeah.
because the devil doesn't want us to come to God. He
Right.
doesn't want us to, he wants to separate us, and he wants to separate us from each other and God. And
Mhm.
that's his main, and he wants to bring us down. And that's
Mhm.
his primary function.
Mhm.
And so all of those you have to do battle with when you're converting, and come up against all those beliefs that you have. I mean, I really didn't like evangelistic Christians when I was in the New Age,
Right.
because we go to fairs, like you go to a psychic fair, and I'd be doing readings, and they'd be outside with their signs saying, repent, the end is coming, and and saying things about us that I didn't like.
Mhm.
And I think the biggest shock, which always stayed with me, was that original psychic healer that I went to. She moved away after a few years and I couldn't find her. Her name was Becky. Lo and behold, she became a Christian. And when I went to talk to her, I was shocked. Why would she leave her guides, what she was doing, what I had found to be now so wonderful. Why did she convert? But she drove me away because she was just too evangelical for me.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't listen to her. I couldn't listen at all. Yeah. And when I was converting, my husband couldn't even talk to me very much about it. He had literally hundreds of people praying for me. Thank God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's one way that you can pray for your friends who are New Age. If you have prayer circles and stuff, put them on the prayer list just to pray for you. Because when I finally converted, I remember being in, and was still a catechumen, but when I was finally converting in my heart and I really wanted to be with Christ, one day I was staying in church and I felt the prayers of everybody that had been praying for me. I just felt them, and I turned to my husband. I said, "Oh my God, you have all these people praying for me." And he goes, "Yeah, I do."
Oh, that's so beautiful.
So thankful for it, because they're part of what pulled me through this
Mm-hmm.
very difficult conversion. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so kind of as a segue, I really want to talk about the Theotokos and your love for her and the role that she's played in your life over the last 25 years. And it ties in a little bit with what we're saying about New Age, because as you said before, New Age is all about yourself. And when I was in the New Age, it was like, God, we call each other goddess, all the goddesses. And it's this idea of like building up your own, being able to manifest, building up your powers to manipulate reality, and worshiping the creation instead of our creator. And so how would you say that our love now for the Theotokos is in contrast to the love, the worship of ourselves and the worship of the created reality versus our creator?
Well, I did have an experience when I was a young girl. I went to a retreat, in a Catholic retreat, and I did have an experience of the Mother of God coming to me. That's when I wanted to become a nun. But my mother wouldn't let me do that. And it was very powerful. I just was praying in their chapel, and all of a sudden I just felt the presence of the Mother of God. And yeah, it was just one of my defining moments in life. And the problem was that later on, when I talked about being sexually abused, when I reached the age of 9, I was raped by a neighbor. And when you're a Catholic, so you're raised with this image of the Mother of God being pure, which she is. But the Catholic Church holds it that she was never, that she's immaculate, just like, just like Christ. But she wasn't born immaculate. She was born like you and me. She was born just as a regular person. But as a Catholic, there's a psychosis around this, that, that she is this pure, it's really hard to live up to her if you've been abused. And because I had the experience of her as a very close experience when I was younger than that, like probably around the age of 7 or 8, and then had the sexual abuse thing, I felt really unclean. And that from that point on, for a long time, I mean, that's when my heart started closing to God, actually. That's when I first started departing the church, because I couldn't reconcile the holiness of the Mother of God with my being not holy. Yeah. And ruined, my virginity ruined, right? Yeah. And so that was always in the background for me. And when I got received into the church, all that changed. And my husband and I were very devoted to the Mother of God. and I am very devoted to the Mother of God. And it's because she is our role model. She lived in and around sin all the time, but she loved God so much that she didn't sin. And her focus was completely on God, which is so different than the New Age goddess thing, right?
Mhm.
It's the focus is on you, it's not
Yeah.
on God.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so I think she just became an inspiration because she is the human being that is higher than the angel. She is the manifestation of what we're all trying to achieve, which is to become in the image and likeness of God. She achieved that in her lifetime by the grace of God, and her devotion and her discipline and her deep prayers. She was so holy that God could dwell in her womb. And so if she can do it, then we can do it. I mean, it's by the grace of God. It's not something that we do ourselves, other than we incline ourselves towards goodness, that we turn our will towards God. But she is our role model. So the more that we can emulate her and she said very little in the Bible, so we don't have a whole lot to go by, But the more we can emulate her holiness, and her devotion to God, the more we will be shaped into the image and likeness of God.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I would have had any other image in my home when I was in the New Age, anything else but the Theotokos. And it's just so crazy how my life has changed so much. I had images of all kinds of Hindu goddesses and Hawaiian goddesses. It could have been any other archetype but her. And now it's the exact opposite. I just want to have her around me everywhere to remind me.
And she really helps when you call on her. Life can be very scary and challenging, and every morning I just wake up and I pray to her. Like the first thing that comes out of my lips are a prayer to her. Because I heard a story about, my husband loved this story, and it was a story about a man in Russia during the just before the revolution in the early 1900s, and he died of pneumonia. And he had been raised marginally Orthodox. He died of pneumonia, and when he was dying, the whole thing was a very vivid experience for him that he remembered. And so then after he died, he went out of his body, and he's looking down at himself and going through the 3 days that you're here supposed to be completing certain things with people and experiences. And then he started to get pulled up to the light. And so he's being pulled up, and all of a sudden the demons start attacking him. And he got totally freaked out. And he was like, he just remembered this. And then all of a sudden he remembered from his childhood calling on the Mother of God. And so he did. And then they all vanished. Now, he kept going up and up and up, and then all of a sudden he got up and he saw this beautiful, field and, light. And then a voice came out and said, "Not ready yet." Sent him back.
Wow.
Yeah, he became a monk. He wrote a story. It was published, and this was an audio tape that my husband had gotten hold of. And so he was sent back, and he became a monk, and he wrote a story, and he devoted his life to God after that. Right. It's an actual story.
Oh my God.
But I always remember that. So like whenever I'm really scared and I feel like, oh my God, it's all coming in on me there, it's just getting too intense, I just start praying to the Mother of God, because she is the one who will hear us, is quick to hear, as they say from that, icon, Mother of God, quick to hear. She is quick to hear, and she'll just show up just like that and chase them away. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
For those of you that are still kind of making the transition, I know some of this may be a little intense.
Yeah.
that talks about the demons and stuff. I'm sorry.
Or
But
even
the reality,
even people converting from Protestant or becoming interested in Eastern Orthodoxy. I think it's hard to deal with the icons sometimes, or even calling her the mother of God.
right? Yeah, but she is the mother of
She
God.
is the mother of
I
God.
mean, that is undeniable. I mean, she is, even it's in scripture. You can't run away from that. That is the truth. You know, she carried Christ in her womb.
Mhm.
And in order to do that, she had to be in such a state of perfection. That's the one thing that is that the evangelical and Protestant religions don't do. They don't really get into um, the whole magnificence of who Mary is and what she's done. It's
Right.
just not, my sister she went converted to being more of a Baptist, and she, it's Mary's just treated as another human being. Well,
Right,
she
right.
is, but she's not another human being.
Yeah.
I mean, she had to do battle with things that none of us would ever imagine.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to share this book with the audience because, and for those listening on podcast, it's Remember Thy First Love, the 3 Stages of the Spiritual Life in the Theology of Elder Sophrony. And it's by how do you say Archimandrite Zacharias. And my friend from church loaned this to me. I've had it for a couple of months now. It's beautiful. I just have so many other books that I'm trying to read at the same time. But when you had sent me your second book, which is this one, In Christ, I Am a New Creation. And I had been reading this book earlier that evening, and I was reading this book, and you had quoted this book. You had quoted something from this book in this book, and it was just another one of those providential moments where I just felt really connected to you and your story, and just it was just a cool thing. But anyway, I wondered if you could talk a little bit about anything about why you like this book, or anything about Elder Sophrony you wanted to share.
Well, I am not as connected to Elder Sophrony as some people are, but I'm very connected to that book. And when I was writing my second book, I started my style of writing has developed from the first book. Once I entered more into the Orthodox domain, because my first book is really about my life before, during, and just up to my experience that completely changed my life of the resurrection. Then after that, that's when my whole Orthodox writing really goes into much more depth. And in order to do that, I like to reference different scriptures, spiritual fathers, because the writing that I was doing, when I was doing it, was really about what I was experiencing and trying to get answers about what is this that I'm experiencing. Mm-hmm. Again, it's that part of me. I seem to have this part of me that needs to be able to put into exclamation some of the spiritual processes that we're going through, especially as an Orthodox Christian, and make it real. So my books are really about me going through the experience of just dealing with being now an Orthodox Christian in my second book, and what's happening to me, and why is this happening to me, and what is it about, And so Elder Zacharias's book, I picked it up. I couldn't put it down because it was so right on. So just to give people a little gestalt of my books, there's 3 different processes that you go through when you're an Orthodox Christian. You go through, in my first book, I'm talking about illumination, purification, and theosis, which happens when you convert. You experience purification. You have to start to purify yourself in preparation for being received into the church. And that's a purification on all different levels. And then you experience illumination when you get baptized, and you're in this experience of grace. And when we're in moments of grace, we actually touch into theosis, which is being closer to God. And so that's an ongoing process. Conversion is something that never stops once you start and become an Orthodox Christian. If you are involved in your faith, if you go to confession and services, this process of conversion, of the change in your heart, just happens because it's how God is bringing us towards our salvation and changing us into his image and likeness. And so you've got the purification, the illumination, and the theosis, which is an ongoing process. And then you have the stages of, which is in my second book, is about the stages that you go through. So after you get received into the church and you're baptized or chrismated, and you've entered into your second and the real conversion, where you've turned your heart towards Christ and God, then lo and behold, you're in this honeymoon phase, where where it's like, it's just wonderful after you are baptized. It's just an amazing thing. That's why people wear these white robes when you get baptized and you're wearing them. But there's an illumination that's going on. It is really happening in you. And it'll go on for anywhere from 2 years to 7 years sometimes in some people. And then all of a sudden something changes. And that's where I was. And when I wrote the second book, it's like all of a sudden the grace is not there all the time. And it forces you to turn towards God. And this is what Elder Zacharias is talking about in this book. Remember thy first love. Because it's in what they call the desert. You're in the desert then. You go out and it's like going, like monastics going out in the desert in the days of old. You're out there and you're working hard to learn how to be a daughter or son of God, instead of learning how to have a fear of God. And what does that mean? And learning how to deal with your passions differently, and learning how to find Jesus in your heart, all of that. And the only way that happens, because if you're in the honeymoon for too long, you get spoiled. It's like you suddenly, it's like really nice, and you have to start to work. God wants you to work for your grace. And so that's what happens. You get in this spiritual desert, and then the end of that state, the third stage is when you enter into a state of love. So most of us will spend most of our Orthodox experience in the second stage. We'll spend a lot of time in purification, some moments in illumination and theosis, and then we'll also be in the honeymoon for a while. And then, but the most where we're going to spend is in this little desert that God has given us, where he's helping us to learn how to want him, to love him, to go to him when we're in crisis, not to go to our coping mechanisms, right?
Right.
Yeah. And so that's what the second book is about. And that's what that book by Elder Zacharias is about how to remember thy first love, which is God. Yeah.
Wow. And I want to remind the audience that Veronica has had to endure a lot of physical challenges, a lot of chronic pain and fibromyalgia, and a lot of terrible physical issues that a lot of people never have to face. And her books are so inspiring to me, for example, because she's talking about how she trusted God even in the hard times. Sometimes it was really hard for you to really trust him and give your life to him, but the reward of being able to eventually do that is just the way you write about it is just amazing. And we had talked a little bit off camera about writing as a healing modality in a way as well. And you really have such a gift. There's just this really deep, heartfelt, vulnerable sharing that you've given us with these books, and they're just beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Well, each one took 6 years to write.
Wow.
Yeah, they were a work of literally a work of love. The first one I wrote when I had Lyme disease, and and that's what God made me do, to write it, because I was a little afraid to start writing. I didn't really know how to write. I mean, I always liked writing, but I didn't know how to write an Orthodox book
Mhm.
about my conversion. And that was a whole, and in order to write that first book, I had to remove all judgment had to be pulled out of my life. When you're writing about your life, we have a lot of judgments about it, especially after we convert,
Yeah.
like, oh, I could have done this differently, or I should have done
Mhm.
that better. But
Oh,
I had to
yeah.
get all of that out, and that was a healing. That's what actually got me over Lyme disease, was taking all the judgment out of the book. Went along with whatever treatment I was doing. And so, so yeah, that's how God has worked through me. And, and all I can do is, I consider myself the guinea pig, and I'm just writing about, okay, well, this is what I had to do to learn how to get through the desert. And then the third book, which you could hold up my third book, which I just finished. This one, it's called In Christ I'm a New Creation, A Leap of Faith.
I have to talk so that the camera picks up on me. So here it is, everybody. And I am not quite finished with this one. Veronica sent this to me a couple weeks ago, but like I said, I'm trying to read through so many books. So I apologize I didn't finish this for our interview today, but I am going to finish it probably tonight. And it has photos and it talks about building your house on your property near Platina, or in Platina.
Well, it was actually, we bought property next to St. Herman of Alaska Orthodox Monastery up in Platina, California. My husband, this is the third in the trilogy, and it's about yet another process that we go through, which is learning the difference between worldly knowledge and spiritual knowledge, and how to live that, and how to be in faith versus in worldly knowledge. And so the third book is our story of wanting to leave the world and live next to an Orthodox monastery for several years. My husband had been originally a deacon, and when we moved into a different jurisdiction because of former marriage issues, we weren't allowed to serve. He wasn't allowed to serve as a deacon, and that was absolutely devastating for him. That was his trial by fire, whereas mine was more in my health. And so it took him several years to recover from that loss. And then as part of doing that, he used to drive up to the monastery up in Platina all the time he felt that the Mother of God was so strong up there, along with the saints, Blessed Seraphim Rose, and they have about 100 relics of saints up there. And it's a beautiful monastery, and with a lot of sweat and being in the desert to create it up there. It's one of the first American monasteries in the United States, Orthodox monasteries. And so we bought this property that he had been praying to the Mother of God, because he'd go up there and he'd see this land all the time, but the wrong phone number was on the land. The guy didn't realize it. And so one day Greg was driving up there and he saw a different phone number, and he called, and sure enough, it was available, and we bought the land. And then for 17 years, we went up there whenever we had vacations. It was our go-to, and that's where I wrote all my books, because I had to do something up there, because I couldn't do the physical labor of building the cabin he was building, or fixing up the land. So he'd fix up the land and I would write my books. And then in 2013 we moved up there for 4 years. We actually lived in the cabin that Greg built, which is in there. The pictures are in there. And we lived next to the monastery and immersed ourselves into an Orthodox worldview completely, and left. We come back to the world to visit relatives and friends, but it was an extraordinary experience. Very challenging at times, incredibly wonderful. I would never trade it for anything in the world. So that the third book's about that journey. And it was literally our last spiritual journey together, because when we came back from being up there, then he passed away about 9 months later.
I'm so sorry. Memory eternal.
Thank you. It's dedicated to him, because
oh yeah,
dedicated to him. Yeah. So anyway, that's about faith, about how faith works and how faith is so different than worldly knowledge. And so this is the third kind of way that we move through things, is in the process of purification, illumination, and theosis, of going through the stages. We also go through understanding that we are living in worldly knowledge, which has to have proof about everything, or it won't do anything. You won't do anything if you don't have proof, right?
Mm-hmm.
You won't take any risks. You won't go anywhere. You won't do anything that isn't backed up by facts and proof. Mm-hmm. Whereas faith doesn't exist in that realm. It exists outside of that. And for all of us that are ongoingly converting, faith is an issue. How do we keep the faith? It was really hard for me after Greg passed away. How do I keep the faith? And so that's what this book is about, is how do you stay connected to faith? And it's based on the writings of, in particular, Saint Isaac the Syrian, his homily 52 about worldly knowledge versus faith. Yeah. And when you're in the desert, when you're in that second phase, you're in a lot of the work between letting go of what you know about worldly knowledge and basing your actions and your thoughts and what you do on worldly knowledge, and starting to base it on faith. Mm-hmm. And how do you move through faith? How do you take those risks and make those leaps of faith? Right? Yeah. And then the end of that is, so you're in this, exchange of worldly knowledge versus spiritual knowledge. And you'll have moments where you finally get, oh, this is what faith is. And then that's when the grace comes in, and then all of a sudden then it's pulled away again. And then you gotta work more on it, you got to get back to faith and let go of your worldly knowledge. And then the end again is theosis, or love, or being connected with God. Right. Yeah.
Well, I want to just spend maybe 5 more minutes with you. I really wanted to talk about our similar love for St. John of Shanghai. He's played a big role in your life, and he's starting to play a big role in my life too. And I just wondered if you wanted to share anything about him. Sure.
By the way, the monks up in Platina were very connected with Blessed John. And they have a lot of relics of Blessed John up there. And the iconostasis was given to them by Blessed John when they were, the monks that originally founded Platina were under the instruction and guidance of Blessed John. Yeah.
Was he the bishop? Was he bishop at that time?
Mm-hmm, of San Francisco. And well, Blessed John has gotten me through some very difficult times and continues to do so. And my husband had a very profound experience of Blessed John. He was able to go to canonization of Blessed John. I couldn't, because I couldn't stand long enough to do that. But he did. It was like a long ceremony, and people were just like crammed in like sardines. Mm-hmm. And but his first experience of Blessed John was when he was also a catechumen, and he drove a priest friend to the cathedral to venerate Blessed John's relics. And my husband had this really ugly wart on his finger. I mean, it was gross. It was huge. It was like, I would beg him sometimes to go get it taken off. He says, no, I'm leaving this there because when this goes away, I know I'm on the right spiritual path. It's like, okay, honey, okay, Oh, can you pause it just for a minute? Someone's at my door. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Okay. So we had a little distraction there. Someone came to my door. But at any rate, yes, the wart. So he went to this first visit, and when he came home that night, he still had the wart. When he woke up the next morning, after venerating and praying at Blessed John's, the wart was gone.
Amazing.
Just gone, and I should show you. He actually made, when he was a catechumen, my husband made all kinds of wood burning icons, wood burned, and he did one of Blessed John, so I'll show it at the end.
Oh, great.
Yeah, he did. And then when he went to the canonization, he got an actual relic from the tomb. They handed out pieces of Blessed John's tomb.
Wow.
And so for me in particular, when I was writing book 2, or when I was telling a story about what I went through and what I was writing about in book 2, I was, I wound up being bedridden for 9 months with terrible back problems that couldn't be diagnosed properly. And it was my perfect storm year, really a perfect storm year. And then that was where I discovered how to find Jesus in my heart, which was a quest I'd always had. I didn't realize it until, and I had to be brought to the point where I couldn't sit, stand, walk. I was in pain all the time, every day. And all I could do was lie down at night to get some sleep, face down on my massage table. And I started praying the Jesus prayer. And that is when, because I just didn't know how else to get, he had to do so much to humble me. And that's where I got lowered to the ground and I got humbled. And I started to find Jesus in my heart. So the book's really worth reading for that, because it's my experience of how I found that. But once I did that, and I also let God in to heal me in a way I'd never been able to before, then I started to recover. And part of my recovery was I had to go to a pool out at the beach in San Francisco. And I decided that part of my recovery was to go visit Blessed John at least Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I went 6 days a week to try and get myself back, because I had, I was just not able to do a whole lot. And as part of my recovery, I had to go swimming, had to do a lot of things to get back. And so when I would go there, it was like, I'd go in there and I would just weep and weep and weep. And it was like everything I said, everything I felt, everything I was going through, he heard. And it was a lot about my past, about the channeling that I had done, about which also the book is about, the ways that I had been deceived. And it was so hard for me to get that I had strayed that far, and what I had, how deceived I'd been. And it was Blessed John that got me through that. Yeah. And so I still, whenever I'm in dire need, or actually I have a Zacharias and I do it at least 2 or 3 times a week,
Oh.
Yeah.
I did the Akathis with my subdeacon when he took me there.
Yeah.
We did it in front of Father John's.
There's a nice recording of it. If you go look on there's a OCA church down in Georgia that, I think it's Georgia, Birmingham, Georgia, that has recorded beautiful recordings, and they did a recording of Blessed John's Akathist. It's absolutely wonderful.
Oh,
I can look on my phone here to see the name of the.
Or maybe later you could find it and send me the link, and I'll put it in the description for everybody.
It's really beautiful, and so and then I'll show you the icon that my husband.
Oh yes, please. And for my viewers, I will have my icon of Father John up on my wall by the next video. I brought it to church just this past Sunday for the blessing. But oh, that's beautiful. You'll have to talk so the camera can go back to you.
Oh, I got it. Okay, so this is my husband made this when he was a catechumen.
Wow.
And that was after his wart was disappeared. Yeah.
Wow, very artistic. So he made several icons. Is that
what? Oh yeah, I'll show you another one he did too. I'll show you.
Okay. I love icons.
This one is my favorite.
Oh, beautiful.
Theotokos. And he also did ones of Saint Herman and Saint Innocent. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
All these he did when he was a catechumen. Yeah.
So it's wood, and then what kind
Well,
of?
he wood burned
Mhm.
the, so some of it is wood burned, and then he used acrylic and he painted it in
Oh,
acrylic. Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. And
Yeah.
there's a photo of Greg in the third book. And what a sweet and gentle face and smile. Here he is.
There he is. My saint. He,
Mm.
yeah, I tell of visitations that I've had since he passed away in the book too.
Ooh,
So,
and
yeah.
I'm definitely going to finish reading tonight.
Yeah. Well, it starts with that. It starts with the visitation I had after I was in Sacramento, really pretty down, probably the lowest I've ever been in my life.
Oh, the where he's serving in heaven. That's right. I did read that. Yes. Oh my gosh.
So it was, and that was totally, so the difference between when something comes from God and when you're a channel, you will it. You open yourself up. You call the guides in, and it's, you're doing that. But when God works through you, it doesn't work like that. It just, when it's a vision from God, when it's something from God, it just shows up. It's an answer to a prayer
Mhm.
that you've had for a long time. It's not anything that you would have imagined or could have imagined that would happen. And that's the way you can tell the difference between when you're doing something and when God's doing something. Because when
Mhm.
God does it, there's no confusion whatsoever. It's just all God. And then you're there and you're completely humbled, and it's like, okay, yeah, everything else I was doing was not this.
Right. There's humility. That's something that's kind of a recurring theme on this channel that I talk about with my guests, is that there's no repentance in New Age. There's no humility, and humility is so important on the spiritual path. I mean, it's like the most important thing, and it's missing from New Age
It
practices.
is. It is, because it's all about you in the New Age, and it's
Mhm.
not about God, Yeah. It's your transformation, your this or that.
Mhm.
Whereas in the Orthodox faith, it's all about your relationship with God,
Yeah.
and how he works through you, and is helping to bring you to his image and likeness.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Well,
Veronica,
thank you for
thank you.
having me. I've thoroughly enjoyed this interview, and
I'm
I
so
hope
glad.
your readers, or not readers, but yeah, some of them will be my readers, but
Yeah.
I hope your viewers will enjoy this as well. And um, yep, I just, you can always put my email address from my book if you want to post it.
Oh, okay. So should people buy the books directly from you, or how do you prefer that they
It's
purchase?
better they just buy them from Amazon, because
Amazon. Okay.
the shipping these days is
Mm,
gotten so expensive that
yeah.
it's much easier if you just go on Amazon. All my
Mhm.
books are there. By the way, I have one other book which you didn't mention, because I didn't send it to you. I wrote a book about my saint, Saint
Oh,
Veronica, and it's that was the fourth book that I did when I was up there. Yeah, and it we did a lot of reading of the lives of saints up north, and I was amazed that I'd find all these stories about Saint Veronica that weren't, she's the woman with an issue of blood who was healed by touching the hem of
mm,
Christ's garment. But she also had a whole lot of other miracles and things that happened around her. And there's a service in here to Saint Veronica that I wrote, which was blessed by Bishop Benjamin. And I had the support of Mother Millennia from the Calistoga Monastery in writing it. And so it's my offering to my saint and to God.
oh
Right.
my gosh. When did that come out? When was that published?
This came out right after Greg passed away. I decided to finish it right after he passed away, and I didn't do much promotion of it because I was still too traumatized from his loss.
Mm,
Yeah, but it's a wonderful. It's very artistic. It's got lots of icons and beautiful cross calligraphy in it. And it shows the difference between the Catholic version of Saint Veronica and the Orthodox version. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I would like to ask my audience, if you have a parish bookstore, please ask the buyer for the bookstore to start carrying these books if you don't yet, because they're just, I love biographies. And in fact, one of my favorite books is it's right here. The Gurus, the Young Man and the Elder Paisios. I just love the style. And I had read this before I even knew about you, right before actually. And so the more autobiographical books about converting to Orthodoxy that are out there, the better, I think, because I love conversion stories and I just love that personal element of an autobiography that you get from hearing it directly from the person who experienced it. There's just nothing like that. So thank you.
I agree. I think the books I love the most are the stories about the saints, actually, because then you can really experience what they went through and learn a lot from just how they lived their lives.
Yeah, I'll put a link to the prologue in the description too, because they're daily readings that you guys can check out, learn about the saints every single day of the year. And anything else you want to say before we say goodbye?
Oh, other than to wish people a very good Lent. And, it's not an easy time to get through. And I talk about my first Lent in the Orthodox Church in my book. And it was very humbling again. Yeah. And my very first experience of Pascha. And that was something that totally and completely altered my life forever. And so I encourage all of you to, as much as possible, fully participate in the services of Lent and to keep going. If you're struggling with the process of your conversion, it's part of the process, and to keep asking those members of your church for help, support. I wouldn't have gotten through it without a lot of support from people around me.
Yeah, I agree. Support is so important.
Especially if you're leaving the New Age. And
if
you're leaving the New Age, you really could use a lot of support. Yeah.
All right. Well, to my audience, thank you all for watching. If you want to get in touch with me about my coaching services, you can reach me at A Devotional Heart on Instagram. I also have a bit.ly link that will be at the very top of the description of this video, and it has all my links, all the different ways you can get in touch with me. So until next time, I wish you all a beautiful day and God bless all of you. Bye.